In today's new workplace brought on by the pandemic, the topic of employee mental health has risen front and center. The workplace is being forced to adapt to change, whether it's juggling remote work while helping kids with online learning, staying safe as an essential worker in a higher risk environment, or just finding the time to take care of our own physical and mental well being. All of us are being impacted in some way or another. In fact, according to the recent AI at Work study ran by Oracle and Workplace Intelligence, this pandemic has created the most stressful year in history, negatively impacting the mental health of 78% of the global workforce. And interestingly, 82% of people want robots to support their mental health at work. I'm extremely excited to have Dan Schauble here with me today to share his insights on this topic. Dan is a New York Times best-selling author, industry thought leader, and managing partner of Workplace Intelligence. Thanks so much for joining, Dan.
So happy to be here with you to shine light on this important topic and this massive study that we just did.
Absolutely. Well, actually, I took a look at the study results, and after digging in, there were a couple of questions I'd love to ask you for your insights on. The first one is that all sizes of businesses have been experiencing stress and anxiety more than ever before. That was apparent. However, the extent to which respondents strongly agreed with that goes up as company size increases. In other words, as company size goes up, stress levels go up as well. What do you think drives that?
Yeah, it's interesting because it's counter to what I think most people would believe because we've heard so many of these small businesses that have closed or the suffering, they don't have the resources, right? The restaurant that's maybe down your street just closed, they couldn't have the help, they couldn't have outdoor seating. So you would think that the smaller the company, the more likely they would be to have employees suffering because of the lack of resources. But the studies found the opposite. And my belief in this is that the leaders at the top of those companies, based on what we found, are suffering the most. And, you know, think about suffering if you have 2 employees versus 10,000 employees. I mean, you're responsible for so many more people, and therefore more stress is headed your way, not less. Harder, and that hurts your home life. And if you're the CEO or a leader of a major company, you're kind of always working, always thinking about working more so. You have more responsibilities. And so even though they have more resources, they're suffering the most. And therefore, because of the politics of being in a bigger company, a lot of the bureaucracy, a lot more is demanded on employers with bigger companies because they have fewer resources. And so it's really posed a big obstacle for these big companies and the leaders that run them because there's way more responsibility, there's way more pressure, and especially for big companies that are big public companies, they're more likely to get the negative press online. And so I think that there's a lot being expected of them and they need to rise to the occasion. But temporarily, yeah, they are suffering the most because the more employees you have, the more people you're responsible for.
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, and Dan, you mentioned a couple things there, in particular about the leaders of organizations. And one of the interesting findings I also saw was that the C-suite are the most positive about remote work, despite working more hours, having increased stress and anxiety, and finding it hard to manage work-life balance. They're actually the least likely to feel overwhelmed, most likely to feel excited. And they say that they've been able to spend more time with family, was one of the common things they said. Why do you think that is? And what impact do you think that might have on the working experience for leaders in the future?
First thing is, I grew up in the business world and culture hearing the phrase, it's lonely at the top. And what you just said in the survey validates that. But what is very fascinating is that people who are older are more likely to benefit from and enjoy the aspect of remote work. Whereas young people, they would much rather be in a physical environment doing work. And the reason for this is because college students, especially when they graduate, they see work as an extension of their college experience. And it's like kind of grown up college. And so if they're not able to connect with their peers in person, it's much harder. That's why you see younger people wanting to be in cities. And that has never changed. Whereas people who are more senior, you know, typically on the road more, typically have a lot of more responsibilities, have worked in physical office spaces for much of their career, and who have children to account for, they love remote work because their whole life becomes much more manageable. Like flexibility has always been a thing, but now COVID is not only the gasoline that has been poured over remote work, which is one of the biggest workplace trends, but it has enabled people through technology to be able to better manage their own life. And executives have had years and years and years of struggling with work life integration and being able to balance the needs of their family versus the needs of work. And now, because of all of their experience, and because there's a need at home to be able to be with their children and loved ones, whereas younger people are less likely to have families to account for and more likely to live by themselves or their roommates. This degree of flexibility has supported those needs for them and enabled them to be able to manage every aspect of their life. But that has also come at one big thing, one big cost, which is mental health. And their families can't escape the mental health issues that their remote working senior executive husbands or wives are feeling right now.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Actually, you'd mentioned technology as part of that too, and that was my third question. Is one of the things the study showed is for those that are currently using AI at work, they perceive that COVID-19 has actually accelerated the company's willingness to invest more in AI tools, and that their organization is making good use of technology like AI to ensure the safety and the health of the workforce. And I was wondering, is this a general trend you're seeing? And do you see the pandemic as kind of a catalyst to adopt more AI in supportive technologies in the workplace?
Absolutely. And actually, just having studied the impact and usage of technology from early on in the pandemic, there was a study by EY that found between March and April that over 40% of companies were investing more in technology because of COVID. And then just looking into that, which was really interesting, is during a crisis like the one we're living through, pandemic and a recession, where it's harder to come by cash and companies are leaner, the cost of labor is actually greater than the cost of investing in more technology. Thus, companies are investing more in technology. So it's a cost perspective, it's a investment perspective, a scalability to meet the needs of the business, of customers, of employees, and then just technology in terms of the tools, artificial intelligence tools, collaborative tools, because with so many people working remote, they need the technology to set them up for success because technology has powered the remote workplace. And, when my parents were growing up, they didn't have this technology, so they couldn't work remote, but now we have it. So we should be grateful that we have it, because without it, the unemployment rate would be in multiples of what it is currently. And through all this technology, these artificial intelligence technologies, it's equipped people working from home with the tools that where they can get the right information at the right time to solve their problems and to make work more efficient. One of the great things that's happened now, and of course a lot of people are suffering, but one of the nice things is that people have realized that things can be much simpler than they are. Like I've talked to a lot of executives and employees at companies when it comes to onboarding, when it comes to different business processes, especially in HR, things have been much more simplified now. The onboarding experience pre-COVID took forever and it was complicated and it was frustrating and employees didn't really enjoy it. Yet onboarding is so important because a successful onboarding program depicts the lifetime value and productivity of a worker and how long they stay with you. And so by using technology to make a process like onboarding more seamless, more in the hands of the employees, removing a lot of the things that were part of the package, pre-COVID, it simplified it. So people like the experience better, actually. And it's a different experience because you're not meeting people in person, but but it's forced HR executives and leaders to say, hey, we now have a chance to improve. So COVID has forced the change that everyone was hoping for, accelerated the use of technology. It's not like companies didn't want to invest in technology, they just had to invest in technology. So it's forced the change that we were all hoping for, and that will push companies further, and that will enable people to successfully work for the coming future.
Well, Dan, thank you so much for those insights. Great study. Obviously, really timely in terms of all of these things that we're all sort of struggling with. I thank you so much for your time today.
Thanks for having me.
All right.